Startup ecosystems like Silicon Valley, the envy of the world, don't exist in a vacuum. They are intricately connected to national economies, but instead of just being rocked by macroeconomic shocks, they are increasingly the drivers of economic growth. And that goes beyond the runaway successes or unicorns that make the headlines. So how much can startup ecosystems reveal about the future of our economies, as well as tech and investment trends? I'm Tomasz Koper, and this is Connected on TaiwanPlus. To help us understand why startup ecosystems matter and how they shape our economic future, we are joined in Taipei by Eric Fan, Deputy Director of the Taiwan Institute of Economic Research, a think tank which recently published its Taiwan Startup Ecosystem Report 2025. And joining us from Chiang Mai, Thailand, is Eli David Rokah, the founder and CEO of StartupBlink, a Singapore-based global research center focused on the startup economy. So Eli, I want to start with you here. The San Francisco Bay Area, Silicon Valley, which everyone knows, I think by this point in time, tops the StartupBlink global ecosystem rankings this year, which really comes as no surprise to anyone. But what is surprising is that Taiwan dropped by 9 spots to number 54. What does that tell you about the health of the Taiwan startup scene?
Basically, the idea about Taiwan is that it is achieving great things, but maybe we have a little bit of a missing element in the recent startups that were not really receiving an injection of high quality startups that are really making a dent in the world. So, for example, we used to have TSMC. TSMC was a startup in a way. And the goal of each economy is to keep on creating those new startups. And unfortunately, in the case of Taiwan, we are not progressing as fast enough compared to other countries, because the ranking is, of course, relative. So it's compared to other countries. So I think that we have a robust ecosystem, a healthy ecosystem, definitely in the top of the countries. In terms of ranking, it is in the top half and even more, currently ranked 25 in the world. However, at the same time, we're not really generating the new output that would allow us to really create those giants of the future. And I think a lot of people are working on this, so we should be fine.
Well, speaking of people working on this, Eric, this drop in ranking in Taiwan it came despite the fact that the country's tech sector has been showing strong growth in recent years. So why do we see this discrepancy?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting phenomenon happening in the same time in Taiwan. If we look at the top electronic companies in Taiwan, like TSMC, Ellie just mentioned, it got a huge growth due to the AI industry. And so it comes to a question about how we allocate our resources in different areas. So in Taiwan, of course, we care about startups, and we do spend a lot of resources, government resources, to support the startup growth or to support the startup ecosystem. But I think it's about where is the starting point. So when other cities going faster, for example, like Tokyo and in Japan, so they also put a lot of resources to support their own startup ecosystem. So in the meanwhile, and we need to speak out for the startup in Taiwan, and I think it's a good time to do more works for the government to support the startups in Taiwan and realize the importance of incubating new business is important.
Well, we will dig into AI a little more later in the program. But first, Eli, I'm curious, what indicators do you look at to see if a country's or a region's startup ecosystem is on the rise?
Yeah, we're focused mainly on output, which means how much output does a country produce in terms of the number of startups, the total amount of investment, the number of unicorns, and so on and so on. So we're trying to be less subjective here and more objective in terms of really focusing on parameters that we can quantify for each one of the countries and the cities of the world. And I will say that generally, the idea over here is that we also have to remember that government investment and support can also be a double-edged sword in terms of when we're actually giving too much support, we're really creating this word that everyone likes to use, grantpreneurs, people that should actually not be entrepreneurs and are pushed there also because of too much government initiative and too much government support. I honestly think we have too much government support in most of Asia, including Taiwan. We have to remember that in the end of the day, the people that will decide the fate of our startup ecosystems are the startups themselves.
Well, since you mentioned basic indicators there, I do want to bring our audience up to speed and take a look at the trends in startup investment in Taiwan. According to the Taiwan Institute of Economic Research, both the amounts invested in Taiwanese startups and the number of deals have grown steadily over the last decade. What's interesting is that there is no major dip in 2020 and 2021 when economic indicators in many other parts of the world showed serious disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, funding seems to have grown significantly since 2021. Eric, what has contributed to this steady rise in venture funding in Taiwan?
When you look at the entire trend of startup investment in the past 10 years, and we have seen there are two major effects or major trend happened. One is between 2018 and 2019. And back that day, and there is one program, it's supported by National Development Fund to support the angel investment in Taiwan. So we can see the huge increase of the deals happens starting from 300 to over 400. That's one pick from that. And the other one is also the government support, policy driven, is from 2020 to 2021. And that jump is due to several industries, for example, like energy, especially the green energy industry and healthcare. So these two brings the steady growth of the entire startup ecosystem in Taiwan.
Well, Ellie, let's take a more macroeconomic view of this ecosystem and how it contributes to the development of the wider economy. How critical are startup ecosystems for this kind of development?
I think startups are the economy of the future. So in many cases, and this is an issue now, startups are sort of like an inclusive term of everyone should win and we're doing things together. It became fluffy for those that don't realize the real importance of startups. Startups are basically creating high quality jobs. They are pushing countries away from the middle income curse in case they are successful to build a startup ecosystem. They are building those giants like TSMC, Intel, Google. All of those used to be startups. They're now the champions of our economies. So in a way, they have to be taken extremely seriously and not looked at as a social endeavor or a fun thing, but actually the backbone of the economy. And in many, many cases, also the geopolitical standing of a country and its power is now determined also by the strength of its startup ecosystem. And that's why when you create giants like Intel and TSMC and Google and so on, when a country has this ability to create those giants, it generates massive amount of taxes. It has more money to do whatever the country needs in order to thrive. And it's also greatly, greatly improves the geopolitical standing and importance of countries. So I really suggest not to take this lightly and not to look at it as a social, fun economic endeavor. This is the lifeline of a country and its ability to exist. And many countries are not seeing it this way. And I think it's very unfortunate.
Eric, do you agree that what Ellie said about startups is true for Taiwan? If we take away the giants like TSMC, who haven't been a startup in 30 years now, the startups of today, are they the backbone of the Taiwanese economy, or is the ecosystem still a little too nascent to call it that?
The way we think about startups might be different than the other countries. For instance, how we look at startup in the past is we're thinking about industrial transformation and upgrades. We are normally not thinking about disruption. That's many countries, many startups thinking about to disrupt the original industries and make a new one and bring the new business. But in Taiwan, we are more like a supporter. And that might be the reason why we have a lower ranking in the past year, because all our startups are thinking about how to transform the original industry, how to make it more efficient, make it more productive. So from that sense, we have tons of startups. We say they're doing pretty well in Taiwan, but they're not really on the table to let everybody see it.
Ellie, do you think that between startup ecosystems here in the region, at a time when both capital and talent can move between them relatively easily, is any one of them pulling ahead in this competition between countries and their startup ecosystems?
Yeah, when we look at the region, there is a clear winner, which is Singapore, a very small economy, small country, not small economy, but a small country that is punching above its weight in levels that are simply, as far as I'm concerned, unimaginable. From such a small location to be the center of incorporation of Asia, I think that's an example that Taiwan should follow. And the idea over here is very, very simple. Singapore main strength is not actually government support and things like that. It's mainly the ease of doing business and become the place where someone in Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and so on, when they want to do business, they automatically go to Singapore. They have built a brand name of the best place to do business in Asia and probably one of the best ones in the world as well. So by definition, over here, they don't need to do much. They don't need to give grants. They don't need to do investment by the government in the startup ecosystem, which is honestly toxic at some capacity. When I hear about this, I know this is not an organic ecosystem. What was done in other countries, namely Singapore, which is, I think, is the textbook to follow, is just to create an amazing environment of doing business. The entrepreneurs are going to take care of the rest. And I think that if there is one thing that Taiwan should do, is follow this script in a way.